So a little background is necessary here. I have never seen The Walking Dead show, and I have never read the graphic novel. Although the show is on Netflix, maybe later. Until then, let's talk Walking Dead game.
This game is kind of an underdog story. It was developed by Telltale Games. If you're unsure of who they are, they used to be pretty big with their Homestar Runner series, but since have only developed the Back to the Future and Jurassic Park point-and-click games. I haven't played them, but I also haven't heard anything particularly glowing, especially with Jurassic Park. So you can imagine my indifference when I heard they were making a Walking Dead series. And it turns out that this was debatably the best received game of 2012. Having just gone through the 400 Days DLC, I've elected to revisit this episodic title and give my thoughts. So let's go. You play as Lee Everett, a convicted murderer. You're just chilling in a cop car when the apocalypse starts.
This other time.
You escape and quickly run into a little girl named Clementine, whose parents are gone. Lee takes the girl under his wing, and the story is basically the tale of him and Clementine surviving the zombie apocalypse, along with other survivors they meet along the way.
Now, considering how many awards this game has compiled, this isn't exactly going to blow anybody's mind, but the story is really good.
I mean, it kinda has to be. Most zombie games focus on action, but this is a point-and-click game that focuses on story and puzzle solving. Yeah, that's nothing if not original. I mean, you could argue that almost all zombie games are sort of boiling down to point-and-click when you get down to it, but this goes to more adventure game mechanics. I guess before talking about the story, I'll quickly analyze the gameplay, because there is significantly more to talk about with the narrative for once. Well, I'll put it to you this way, guys. There's a reason why the point-and-click adventure game genre was so popular back in the day. Figuring out how to proceed the plot can be an elaborate puzzle, and solving this puzzle can be very satisfying. This satisfaction is very prevalent in The Walking Dead, and as a bonus, it and its very well done dialogue trees lead to a very slow pace that complements the story and atmosphere perfectly. However, there is also a reason this genre kind of fell out of favor with AAA gaming. It is so easy to get stuck. There's nothing I hate more in a game than not knowing where to go or what to do. And adventure games are kind of the living embodiment of this feeling. But The Walking Dead is, for the most part, really good at avoiding this. The solutions are well crafted and sensible. So with a little thought and intelligence, you should be able to solve every puzzle this game tosses at you. However, you probably will hit one or two walls in your 10-hour playthrough for some simple thing that wasn't the game's fault and wasn't really yours either. My biggest roadblock was in the very first episode when I failed to see this brick at the bottom of the screen. Little things like that can happen to anyone, but for the most part, I really like the puzzles.
And then we have the action scenes.
These can be kind of laughable at times, but not really detrimental. You see, the engine was built for pointing and clicking, so when you aren't button mashing, you usually just click on a zombie to kill it, with no skill involved. But since they are rarely used in favor of story and puzzle solving, they still mostly range from tolerable to enjoyable. Mostly. When the game actually tries to be a shooter, you'd think the groundwork would be there. Like I said, any zombie game sort of boils down to point and click eventually, but the enemy hitboxes are pretty shoddy and the controls are a little stiff.
So, yeah, okay, the action scenes are the weakest part of the game, but there are still some shining moments with them. I mean, I can't think of a single jump scare that wasn't effective, thanks mostly to the game's very well done, slow pace. And then we have Lee's walk to the Marsh House in episode 5. I can't exactly go into why because of spoilers, but it's just a perfect scene. You really have to play it to understand what I'm talking about. So, on the whole, as long as Telltale doesn't let these action scenes consume their series, I'm fine with them as long as they work to support a very well-told story.
So you've probably heard about the relationship between Clementine and Lee and how terrific it is. And yeah, what they did with Clementine was an incredible achievement. She's an 8-year-old kid and already red flags would usually go up, as kid characters can be incredibly annoying, especially in video games. But everything with this character was perfect. She's phenomenally written, giving off hope, toughness, charm, and maturity. But she's also vulnerable and just adorable. She's clearly a kid, and there's never a point where she doesn't feel like one. But there's also never a point when you regret having her with you. She gives you feelings of hope and optimism, even at the darkest points of the story. And then there's moments like these.
You didn't accidentally break a flashlight, did you?
No. Did Duck say I did?
No. Did Duck break the flashlight?
I don't think so. He's just always blaming me for stuff.
Like what?
Putting a bug on his pillow?
Did you do that?
Yes.
I just want to hug her whenever she's on screen, and that along with her character growth makes her the highlight of the game. But she's not the only great character. Lee is relatable and badass, and he has such a powerful determination to him. Other side characters such as Lily and Kenny are layered and memorable, and even this other kid named Duck grows on you, and that's saying something considering his voice acting is...
Dad, come on, let's eat.
Good for his age? Well, he still gets really likable in episode 3 when he's pretending to be a detective.
Cool.
Oh, that's so cute. Well, Telltale, you nailed characters. Even when they're ungrateful, selfish, hypocritical douchebags, you still manage to generate sympathy for them. Well done. However,
without spoiling anything, shit gets real in episode 3, and your original group is devastated. With 2 episodes to go, they try to add a few new characters, but really they aren't as interesting as those that came before. I'd personally prefer in season 2 to have my group of survivors built over the first 2 episodes, then slowly have them killed over the next 3. Omid and Krista kinda get the shaft, because you don't really get to take time to get to know them, because by the time you get them, the game gets a faster and action-packed pace that fits really well, but ultimately screws these 2 characters over. They're likable, but I'm just trying to say that I hope the character roster is a bit more front-loaded in Season 2. That's all.
So the story's terrific. You didn't need me to tell you that. So why am I reviewing this game? I mean, I've basically just parroted what everybody else has said about the game. The story's great. Lee and Clem are great. Larry's a dickbag. Why am I here? Well, there are some things I'd like to talk about, spoiler-free, with the moral choice. In some ways, it's fantastic, being a great example of interactivity with a narrative. In other ways, it's kind of neutered in service to give the most compelling story possible.
Look, in a perfect world with limitless budgets and development times, as well as boundless creativity, every decision would have a huge impact. Every character you meet in the game could either be alive or dead by the finale, possibly having several opportunities to die. And there should be numerous different endings based on your actions. We don't really get that. Every single character that can be alive at the end of the game will be alive. Every character that can be dead at the end of the game will be dead. Every character with an ambiguous fate will always have an ambiguous fate. This game really only has one ending, with only a slight variant that is determined by a choice given in the midst of the ending. For a game that is admittedly a damn good example of player choice, you really don't have that much control. Here's an example, one of the first choices in the game. Save Duck or Sean. Choose to save Duck and Duck lives while Sean dies. If you choose to save Sean, Duck lives and Sean dies.
So, what exactly changes?
It changes who you are allied with in the group and who hates your guts. And this is pretty effective at first. There's this huge choice towards the end of episode 2. The giant rivalry between the 2 leaders of your group comes to a head and you must finally pick sides for good. And you visibly feel the consequence of your choice for a little while. And then, like I said, shit gets real towards the middle of episode 3, and whoever isn't dead or gone is in a really bad mood no matter what. There's a small bit of repercussions at the end of episode 4, and the emotional climax of episode 5 is one hell of a climax, in no small part due to an excellently done list of your horrible decisions. But I would have liked to see more. I don't like how every character's fate is inevitable. I don't know, maybe it's some kind of underlying theme, but I hope they expand the consequences in Season 2.
But while the consequences aren't as profound as they probably should be, I'd like to argue that the actual decision-making is perfectly tense.
Sure, most decisions don't have horribly varied consequences, but do you know that when actually playing the game for the first time? Not really, and even if you did know that, you'd still want to make the best choices possible, and it can be incredibly hard to make these decisions, especially on the fly. Hell, on my second playthrough, I resolved to do the opposite of what I had done earlier, but there were some instances when it was actually hard to do that, like this one simple choice with Clementine in episode 4. In my first playthrough, I did square. So I decided beforehand to do the opposite here. But I couldn't do it. I let it run out of time and choose for me. That's really impressive considering it's not actually real. Hell, even the regular dialogue makes you really consider what you should say, which is exactly what a good dialogue tree should do. This is accomplished through masterful writing and scenarios like this.
Seems like he's got a problem with you in particular.
He's just an old racist asshole. That's his deal.
Well, he needs to get over that.
What the old douchebag doesn't know won't hurt him, am I right?
Come on, Larry. Give it a rest, man. Things are different. Being a racist is outdated.
Fuck, Mark!
These don't happen often, but they happen often enough to make you really ponder your word choice. So well done, Telltale. Another thing to consider about the story and how maybe it's not too big of a deal that the choices don't have as much of an impact as they probably should, is that drastic changes in narrative take more manpower. Planning out the narrative becomes a much longer task, models have to be exchanged to compensate for characters who are alive or dead, and more dialogue has to be written and voiced. Even more important, the strength of the narrative would be more likely to be compromised. For example, earlier I complained about how there is only one ending. But anyone who's played this game will tell you that it was one of the most emotional endings they've ever experienced. Imagine if the writers needed to make 5 endings. Could they have given all these endings the same emotional impact? I'd love to see them try it, and they'd get a huge round of applause if they pulled it off, but I'd say that for their first effort, I'd give Telltale a huge round of applause for not biting off more than they could chew. The bottom line is this: it might be a shame that everyone will experience the same narrative, but I can confidently say that everyone should experience this narrative. Alright, before I wrap this up, I'll give my brief thoughts on the 400 Days DLC that came out recently. From what I can tell, it's basically a prelude to Season 2. And you know what? For what we got, I thought it was pretty darn encouraging. Season 1 may have had some great supporting characters, but the main appeal was Lee and Clementine's relationship. I think it's fair to say that they aren't going to be in Season 2, and if they are, it's going to be a late game twist or something. So people were concerned that Season 2 will be weaker without these two, and that still might be the case, but it's pretty impressive that the characters in the 400 Days DLC are very compelling. It's even more impressive given the structure of the DLC. It has 5 mini episodes, each with their own character completely unrelated to any other episode or Season 1 for that matter. Each episode takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete, and by the end, you'll really like all these characters. My personal favorite episode was Wyatt's. I liked how there seemed to be a genuine friendship between him and his companion, and I hope they continue that story arc in Season 2.
Bottom line, I'm really looking forward to see what Telltale can do with their next season. So here's hoping for a great Season 2. In the meantime, I have some loose ends to tie up.